Why this story grips viewers in one sentence. We're revealing the exact moment a Roman word for military courage became the name of angels who orchestrate thunderstorms and rig miracles. A linguistic accident that defined medieval reality and still haunts every fantasy world with elemental spirits. In Seville, circa 630 CE, an aging bishop hunches over parchment, ink-stained fingers tracing connections between Latin roots and cosmic truth. Isidore isn't writing theology, he's compiling the encyclopedia that will define knowledge itself for 8 centuries. 20 volumes covering everything from grammar to zoology, medicine to angel hierarchies. When he reaches the celestial beings, he does something no theologian before him dared. He treats angel ranks like he treats plants, dissecting their names to reveal their function. He writes, virtutes, the virtues. And from that single Latin word, he builds a job description that will reshape Christianity's understanding of how God's power actually touches the physical world. The word virtus pulses with Roman military heritage. Before Christianity, virtus meant the courage of soldiers, the excellence of warriors, active, forceful, masculine power. Roman generals invoked it. Statues personified it as a muscular figure in armor. It meant strength that did things, that moved the world through sheer capability. But watch what happens when this word enters Christian cosmology through Greek translation filters. The Apostle Paul mentions dynamis, powers, forces, among heavenly beings. Jerome, translating the Bible into Latin in the 380s, renders dynamis as virtutes. Suddenly, Roman military virtue and Christian spiritual power occupy the same linguistic space. The word carries both meanings now, moral excellence and raw force. Isidore seizes this double meaning like a detective finding the crucial clue. He writes in the etymological, their very name reveals their nature. Virtus means force, power, capability. Therefore, the virtues must be the angels who apply God's force to creation. Not messengers like Gabriel. Not warriors like Michael's forces. The virtues are the engineers, the technicians, the ones who manipulate the fundamental forces keeping the universe running. And Isidore gets specific. Unnervingly specific. The virtues govern storms. When thunder cracks across Spain's summer sky, when lightning splits the darkness over Visigothic farmland, the virtues are orchestrating it, not through magic, but through their assigned dominion over atmospheric forces. They don't cause weather capriciously, they regulate it, control it, ensure the elements obey divine order rather than descending into chaos. Medieval readers don't see metaphor here. They see an actual explanation for why storms follow patterns, why nature operates by rules. God delegated the controls to the virtues. But it goes deeper. Isidore claims they're spirits of motion itself. In a cosmos where Aristotelian physics is becoming Christian doctrine, motion requires a mover. Planets orbit because angels push them. Rivers flow because spirits maintain their course. The virtues oversee this. They're the maintenance crew ensuring the clockwork of creation keeps ticking. Every raindrop falling, every wind shifting direction, every tide turning happens because the virtues hold the universe's operating manual. Then Isidore makes a leap that defines medieval miracle theory for the next 1,000 years. The virtues assist in miracles. Not perform miracles, God alone does that. But when God chooses to break natural law, to heal the impossible or multiply loaves, someone has to execute the suspension of physics. The virtues are the mechanism. They're the ones who, at divine command, reach into the world's machinery and temporarily rewire cause and effect. A blind man sees. The virtues reconfigure the relationship between his eyes and light. Water becomes wine. They alter molecular structures while maintaining the appearance of natural flow. This isn't poetry. It's logistics. Medieval scholars reading Isidore now have an answer to the question that haunts miracle accounts. How? Not by what authority, that's God, but by what process. Through the virtues, who possess the technical expertise to manipulate reality's building blocks. And here's where Isidore's system becomes unexpectedly human. The virtues perform miracles specifically to strengthen faith. They're not showing off divine power abstractly. They're psychological operators. When a peasant witnesses a miracle, the virtues aren't just bending physics. They're engineering a faith-building moment. They choose which miracles, when, for whom, calculating maximum spiritual impact. They're running targeted conversion campaigns using reality warping as their medium. Imagine the theological implications ricocheting through monasteries as monks copy the etymological. Angels aren't just distant worshippers before God's throne. They're embedded in every natural process, every physical force, every moment when belief falters and needs reinforcement. The virtues are the link between heaven's will and earth's mechanics, between divine intent and actual weather patterns. But Isidore's etymology-driven reasoning creates immediate problems. If the virtues control elements and motion, do they overlap with the principalities, who govern earthly kingdoms? What about the powers, traditionally seen as warriors against demons? Do they get involved when storms become weapons? Other scholars resist Isidore's clean categories. Gregory the Great, writing decades earlier, emphasized angels' shared responsibilities. Dionysius the Areopagite, in the mystical Greek tradition that Latin Europe is still digesting, describes virtues primarily as sources of divine energy flowing downward through celestial hierarchies, not as element wranglers. The debate simmers for centuries, but Isidore's etymologiae is too useful, too comprehensive, too readable to ignore. It becomes the go-to reference work for medieval Europe. Every monastery library has a copy. Every educated person has absorbed its logic. Names reveal nature. When they read virtues, they think storms and miracles. Watch how this crystallizes in medieval art. Unlike seraphim, who get 6 wings and constant flames, or thrones who become wheels within wheels of eyes, the virtues get peculiarly subtle visual treatment. Illuminated manuscripts from the 9th century onward show them holding rods, scepters, sometimes orbs, the symbols of control, not weapons, not trumpets, but instruments of command. They appear during miracle scenes, often in the background while Christ heals or Moses parts seas, hands raised as if adjusting invisible levers. A 12th century German manuscript shows a virtue with one hand raised toward churning clouds, the other gesturing downward toward a sailing ship. The positioning is exact. They're mediating between heaven's command and earth's response. In a French book of hours, from the 14th century, virtues surround a resurrection scene, their wings forming a geometric pattern like a circuit diagram. They're clearly depicted as the delivery system for divine power flowing into the corpse. But here's the twist that reshapes everything. By the high medieval period, theologians realize Isidore's etymology might be wrong. Thomas Aquinas, writing in the 1260s, notes that virtus in Scripture often means moral virtue, not just physical force. Maybe the virtues are named for their perfect goodness, not their control of elements. Maybe they're called virtues because they perfectly embody divine will, making them the most reliable conduits for miracles, not because they're cosmic engineers, but because they're spiritually pure enough to channel God's power without distortion. This interpretation gains traction. It's more theologically elegant, less mechanistic. Renaissance and Baroque art starts depicting virtues more abstractly, beautiful figures radiating light, holding symbols of moral concepts rather than elemental instruments. They're becoming less storm controllers and more exemplars of divine goodness. But Isidore's version never entirely dies. It's too vivid, too functional. When Dante writes Paradiso in the early 1300s, he places the virtues in the 5th sphere of heaven, the sphere of Mars, war, and force. He describes them as those who strengthened martyrs and worked great wonders. The miracle-working function remains. Medieval plays depicting biblical events still bring virtues on stage to make miracles happen through choreographed gestures, as if they're stagehands pulling ropes and operating divine machinery. The Protestant Reformation largely scraps elaborate angel hierarchies, calling them Catholic invention. But the concept Isidore codified, that spiritual beings might govern natural forces, that miracle working involves cosmic intermediaries, that doesn't vanish. It migrates. Alchemy inherits it directly. The virtue of substances becomes their active power, the quasi-spiritual force enabling transformation. Paracelsus, in the 16th century, describes natural virtues as the operative principles in matter. He's one step away from describing angel-like intelligences in chemicals. Natural philosophy, proto-science, struggles with it. Into the 17th century, scholars debate whether magnetism, gravity, and other invisible forces require spiritual agents. Newton himself never entirely abandons the idea that something intelligent might govern gravitational attraction. The virtues hover behind these questions like ghosts of an explanation that reason can't quite replace. And then modern fantasy world-building resurrects the entire framework. Every elemental spirit in fiction is performing the virtues' job description. Studio Ghibli's forest gods who maintain nature's balance. Virtues. The weather wardens in Jim Butcher's novels, who prevent supernatural storms. Virtues. Even Pokemon's legendary birds governing ice, fire, and lightning are functionally Isidore's storm-controlling angels with feathers and stats. The concept is so structurally useful. Intermediate beings who execute divine cosmic will through elemental manipulation that fiction keeps rebuilding it. D&D's outer planes include the elemental planes, maintained by spirits who aren't quite gods. Magic. The Gathering has spirits of wind, water, fire embodying natural forces. Avatar. The Last Airbender's entire cosmology rests on spirits connected to elements and the spirit world's influence on physical reality. Every single one echoes Isidore's logic. Powerful, but not omnipotent beings assigned to govern specific forces, maintaining order between transcendent will and material chaos. The language survives, too. By virtue of still means by the power of, carrying that ancient sense of virtus as active force. When we say something has healing virtues, we're using Isidore's framework, beneficial power operating through mysterious agency. The word never lost its connection to force and capability, even as moral virtue became its primary meaning. And miracle discourse still dances around the question Isidore tried to answer: mechanism. When people debate whether miracles violate natural law or reveal deeper law, whether they're suspensions of physics or manipulations within hidden dimensions, they're wrestling with the same problem. How does transcendent will become physical effect? Modern apologists sometimes invoke quantum mechanics or multiverse theory, different vocabulary, but they're still trying to identify the virtues, the intermediary mechanism that makes the impossible tangible without reducing God to a magician. Standing in modern Seville, you can visit the cathedral where Isidore's relics rest. Tourists photograph the Baroque architecture, unaware that within these walls was produced the intellectual infrastructure for medieval reality. Isidore wasn't trying to be poetic or mystical when he catalogued the virtues. He was genuinely explaining how the universe works, deploying etymology like a diagnostic tool to reveal angels' functions from their names. He was wrong about the etymology. Virtues. In Scripture probably does mean moral excellence more than physical force. But he was right about something deeper: the human need to understand how the transcendent touches the tangible. We build systems, whether angel hierarchies or quantum fields, to bridge that gap. We need intermediaries, virtues controlling storms, dark matter bending space-time, spirits maintaining the balance, because pure mystery is harder to live with than complex mechanism. Every time a screenwriter decides their fantasy world needs elemental spirits, every time a game designer creates beings who govern natural forces, every time thunder cracks and someone instinctively feels intelligence behind it, Isidore's virtues are there. Not as literal truth, but as a pattern, a structure, a way of organizing the relationship between will and weather, between intention and miracle. The medieval cosmos was smaller than ours, but it was full, crowded with beings at every level, specialists and managers, angels with specific jobs maintaining the gap between God and dirt. We've expanded the universe to incomprehensible scale and mostly emptied it of intermediaries. We're alone with natural law and statistical probability. But on some level, we still feel the virtues should be there. When a storm breaks at exactly the right moment, when coincidence feels too perfect, when the impossible happens and faith strengthens, some part of us expects to glimpse them, hands raised, adjusting the invisible controls, ensuring that force and purpose align. The engineers of grace, still on duty, still unnoticed, still making the miraculous look like weather.